Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Sony FE90mm f2.8 Macro G OSS. This is easily one of my top 3 favorite lenses of all time, I will say that right away. Long macro lenses are a bit of a niche, but I think that Sony's 90mm macro is quite a versatile lens. In this video we will take a look at the performance of this lens to find out whether it really is one of the sharpest lenses ever made, and whether you should consider getting one. 90mm is an interesting focal length suitable for example for portraits, short telephoto landscapes, or for product photography. 90mm focal length also provides sufficient working distance for most types of macro photography. I think that it is ideal for flowers, small objects such as wristwatches, and it also works for insects. This is a real macro lens, which means that it can provide 1:1 or 100% magnification. That obviously makes it very suitable for shooting all kinds of details. Of course, it is just as useful for shooting non-macro subjects. I mostly use it for product photography, wristwatches, and flowers. I also occasionally use it for telephoto landscapes and cityscapes if I want the best possible image quality. FE90mm f2.8 is 13.5 cm long. It weighs 602 grams, which is a lot less than I would expect. That is very good for stabilized full-frame macro lens. The outer construction is fully metal. The build quality is generally great, I have no complaints in this regard. It definitely feels like a premium product. I also like the semi-old school look of this lens. Especially the blue and orange numbers on the focusing scale make this lens very recognizable. The mount is metal as well, of course. This lens has some degree of weather sealing, but there is no gasket around the mount. The diameter of the filter thread is 62mm, which is pretty common diameter, but Sony users will probably use a 67mm step-up ring. Mounted on A7 III or basically any other Sony full-frame camera, it is pretty well balanced. As I mentioned, it only weighs 600 grams, so the whole combination is not too front-heavy. A lens hood is included with the lens. It is just a basic plastic lens, not a fancy one, but it does the job. Regarding the control elements, there is quite a lot of those. First of all, this lens has a fantastic focusing ring. You can switch to manual focusing by pulling the focusing ring towards you. It is still a focus-by-wire system, but for all intended purposes, it is at least as good as mechanical focusing. It is extremely smooth and precise. The resistance and focus throw are also perfect. Manual focusing is quite important on a macro lens, and this one is as good as it gets. There is also a focus limiter switch. You can choose a full range, 50 cm to infinity, or 28 to 50 cm. Limiting the focus distance makes the autofocus a bit faster, but using full range is completely fine on modern Sony cameras. There is also a switch for turning the stabilization on and off. That is very nice to see, just keep in mind that it always overrides the in-camera steady shot settings, and it controls both IBIS and lens stabilization. Last but not least, there is a function button which can be set in the camera menu. So how about the optical qualities? Sony FE90mm f2.8 Macro G OSS is widely regarded as one of the sharpest lenses ever made. Some sources even declare that it is the sharpest lens ever. I have tested it with a 24-megapixel full-frame sensor in Sony A7 III. The central sharpness is perfect right from f2.8. The contrast is also perfect and there is basically no chromatic aberration. The central sharpness is the same and therefore perfect at f4, f5.6, f8 and f11. 24 megapixels really is a piece of cake for this lens. The sharpness is still fantastic at f16, but the contrast is a little bit weaker. The corners look exactly the same. We can see perfect sharpness right from f2.8. There isn't any room for improvement from here, so the corners look the same from f2.8 to f11. f16 is again still very sharp, but the contrast is a little bit lower. The chromatic aberration is again nowhere to be found. The sharpness of Sony FE 90mm f2.8 in combination with a 24 megapixel sensor is perfect. There is not much more to say there. It goes without saying that it is the sharpest lens that I have ever tested. I will retest it with a 61 megapixel sensor in the future, but for now it gets a full score. Immense sharpness that we can see in the testing scene also translates to real-world images. Especially if there is a lot of texture in the scene, you can definitely see that the contrast is very high and the rendition is just beautiful. The close-up image quality is just as good. There is absolutely no ghosting at minimal focus distance. The sharpness is still perfect and so is the contrast. As I mentioned, I use this lens a lot for wristwatches, which is quite a challenging task, and I am very happy with the results. Interestingly, there is some visible vignetting and a bit of barrel distortion. Fortunately, this lens is so sharp that it doesn't affect the image quality at all, and it is completely fixed in camera or by Lightroom profile. Another very special characteristic of this lens is the bokeh. It is not an f1.4, but at 90mm on the full frame, you can get very pronounced subject separation even at f2.8. The rendition of the bokeh and the transitions are extremely smooth. Even with busy backgrounds, you won't really get harsh outlines. Interestingly, it only has 9 aperture blades, but it seems to be enough. The bokeh on 90mm macro, in my opinion, looks great. I only shoot about one portrait per year, so when I have to do so, I also use this lens for that, and I am happy with the results. Despite that it is a macro lens, the autofocus is very good. In combination with A7 III, it is as good as with any other recent Sony lens in usual situations. The focus acquisition in non-macro situations is basically instant. There is no hunting at all, and it only slows down if you are focusing from very far distance to macro, which is to be expected. The accuracy is always 100%, which is crucial for a macro lens. Please keep in mind that the results with older Sony cameras may be different. In video, it basically works just as well. The focusing is very smooth and there is no hunting at all. All of the advanced autofocus features such as IAF work, of course. Just like basically all macro lenses, 90mm G exhibits significant focus breathing. This lens is not very suitable for focus pulling in video, but that is to be expected. Another strength of this lens is the stabilization. That is extremely important for handheld, close-up or macro shots. I shoot all of my exterior product shots handheld, and the stabilization allows me to go down to about 1/20th or even 1/15th of the second, which is very helpful. It is also very useful for handheld B-roll video, which is definitely usable. The image stabilization works together with in-body image stabilization, and the result is very good overall. To sum up, I can only say that Sony FE 90mm f2.8 Macro G OSS is an excellent lens. Optically, it is basically perfect. The sharpness with 24 megapixel sensor is literally perfect. The contrast is also outstanding, so the images taken with this lens look great. The focusing is also very good, especially for a macro lens. The build quality is flawless, and it has by far the best focus-by-wire system that I've ever used. Very pleasant bokeh and effective stabilization also contribute to the excellent performance of this lens. Basically, the only two imperfections are the missing gasket around the mount and a bit of focusing noise. Together with Sony FE 24mm f1.4 GM, Sony FE 90mm f2.8 Macro G OSS is my favorite lens that I own. If you are a Sony E-mount user and you have a use for 90mm macro lens, I absolutely recommend it. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you like this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.